I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Marie Pohler, who's come from Flavor Active. Marie's had a lot of different careers, but for quite a while has been working in the world of sensory science. And Flavor Active are a really interesting company. I'd encourage you to take a look at what they do and some of the sensory calibration, though I'm sure Marie will touch on it a lot more. And she's here today to talk about the topic of from education to calibration. So, be my guest.
Good morning, everyone. It's always great fun to be the first one to sound test the system and now see how it works. Stuart mentioned earlier that there's a mixture of people from different community and some people from outside the community. Thank you. Not just people from within the coffee industry. Well, I am that outsider. I'm not a farmer, I'm not a roaster, I don't supply coffee, and I'm not a retailer. So I'm definitely an outsider, but having said that, I'm a very loyal coffee drinker. I've been drinking coffee every morning for the last 24 years, every single morning. It's easier when I'm at home. So, when you have coffee as the first thing that you have, first activity that you have every morning, it's kind of become a ritual, a routine. So every morning at 6:15, I kind of expect my first cup of coffee to be exactly the same. And so it's my second cup of coffee, and that's what I start. I have 2 months of coffee before I get into work. And for the last 24 years, luckily, my husband does a fantastic job. Freshly ground my coffee beans and brew it to perfection. However, when I'm traveling like what I'm now, I'm away from home, then I kind of get slightly disappointed when my coffee, first cup and the second cup of coffee in the morning doesn't work the same. But I kind of have to expect that. Different equipment, different water source, different beans, different person preparing it. So I'll have to expect, okay, oh, is it? There you go. Okay, sorry, you didn't tell me that. Okay, so today, my presentation now for the next 15 minutes, and also my afternoon workshop, is not going to talk about the specialty coffee as such. It's more about the standard of the quality, like the first and the second cup of coffee that I always look forward to wake me up in the morning. So that is I consider that a typical consumer expectation. But then, as I'm a typical consumer, I do have a split personality, I think. So when I'm away on holiday in an exotic place, I actually kind of expect variations and surprises when I wake up in the morning, because I don't have to wake up 6:15 every morning. I can wake up at 8 or 8:30 or 9 o'clock whenever I feel like, because I'm on holiday. So I actually don't expect my coffee, no, let me just rephrase that. I kind of expect surprises in my specialty coffee. So if I walk out of my hotel room into a little cafe and I see a board saying, today we are brewing this coffee, and I get really excited. And I think that's where most of you come from. You have a very unusual setup, and not the typical, you may not be catering to someone as typical as me, like you would expect every 2 cups of coffee every morning to be the same. But I work with a lot of clients who actually now, initially are soft drinks producer. They are giants, global giants and soft drink producers. But they have all now started to get really interested in coffee, regional coffees, global coffee brands. So that's where I come from, because they have come to me and asked me to design sensory panel training linking to consistency in quality. So obviously from these global big brands, their interest is someone like me who expect their morning coffees to be very consistent in terms of quality, aroma, taste, and no surprises there. Except when we go on holiday, then that's a different scenario. So I do have all right. I'm on the wrong side about. Ah, that's better. Okay, I was just in lobby over there, and I overheard a few people talking about coffee off notes. What are the common off notes? Why would you describe those as off notes when some people might say, well, I kind of like this taste, so it cannot be off note, right? Well, off-note definition is quite subjective, actually. But if you are working within a group, a brand, then you want to define that specific off-note. If it's an off-note in, let's say, in Romania, then it is an off-note in Argentina, because you want the global brand consistency to be reflected in your finished product. So that is what I will be talking about today. So you all know this very well, obviously, and I'm the one in the middle, I'm that consumer. And you guys here actually all make a diversity in community, coffee community happens. There are baristas, a few out there roasters, farmers who I met, and very interesting female farmers in Nicaragua, next presenter actually, exporters, importers, we all make this community happens, and that includes consumer in the middle as well. Just another diagram of how typical coffee supply chain works. So from sourcing coffee plant, obviously you know a lot more about this section of the industry than I do, green bean grinding through transportation. So that's an interesting area where you can encounter off notes. Transportation is absolutely key. But some farmers might find that quite difficult to control. It's beyond their control. The beans left their farm, left their storage warehouse. What do we do? Off notes do happen in transportation. Product preparation, roasting, and eventually to someone like me. Okay. I didn't create this slide. It's actually created for me by one of our coffee analytical services partner in the US. They're based in Vermont. So this is obviously a typical slide when you talk about defects. Category 1, coffee bean defects, and category 2 defects. So I will go into details about this, but this is what I assume when you do a roaster class, a barista class, you go through information such as this. This is a lot of it to talk about the visual defects that you can see, and not just the taste and aroma. More information and examples on the visual defects, what happened when the beans are not 100%. So I was told that CoLab typically would not want to see a bullet points presentation, and hence I got heavy on the visuals. First one in the morning, I saw the first presentation, I thought I'll put lots of nice photos in there. So standardized flavors. Why is it so hard but so important to standardize flavors and quality in coffee? Coffee is 100% organic. Typically, when you talk about standardizing flavors and tastes, aromas, it gets more complicated if the product is 100% organic. Like wine. Wine is very organic. So you get batch variation, but people accept that. 1987 Chateau du Pape probably tastes different to the one next year. But people accept it. So I think that's the same scenario for specialty coffee as well. Beans are special. But then, again, going back to the global brand quality control, and that gets quite tricky. Right, just a few areas in the world that where coffee are being consumed. So you can see typically every country, everywhere. So I used this slide before in my last presentation for SCA. I think this was in Korea actually. Just my way of showing how people typically would describe a flavor, a coffee flavor, a coffee of note. And someone say, oh, this tastes like sulfur. Which one? Which sulfur? For our flavor library, we actually typically have about more than 20 ways of describing flavors. We have 20 different flavor standards that has the general description of sulfur. So we have cooked cabbage, rotten vegetables, onion soup, corn on the cobs. They are all generally described as sulfur. So as you can see, someone in Korea might say, oh, this is red. This bean tastes red. But which one? Which red are you referring to? There's so many variations. So the importance of standardizing a flavor understanding and aroma understanding is absolutely key when you want to do quality control in a very organic product. Defects. Again, just some basic description on the defects that we come across in different stages of a coffee supply chain. I will read it for you because I think you can read it yourself very well. When you want to do quality control, you start with training someone who can actually go to taste the products, whether it's the in-process product, finished products. So even the importance of standardizing the training protocol is absolutely key. So the easiest way to standardize your training protocol to reach that ultimate result is actually to find a very easy, simple to use training tool. So there are a lot of them out there, so I won't go into the details of what you can find, but feel free to ask questions later on. Okay, so some of the work that I was involved in, not me personally, there's a team that I work with at Flavor Active, and we work with SCA and WCR agreeing and confirming some of the standardized tools for flavor trainings and the aroma recognition defects. Oh, let's go back to that. When I do sensory panel training around the world, we use a lot of icons rather than spelling out the words, for example. It is what it is. Sometimes they're guesses. So the wheelie bean, I think if you're from the UK, you can probably recognize what that it means. It's a sulfur, rotten, smelly beans, undesirable aroma. But you're not from UK or outside Europe, you may not understand what that actually means. So it needs a little explanation. Icons are great because they break down the language barrier, but it's not 100%. Medicinal, doctor's first aid kit. So what we describe medicinal as, there are different ways of describing medicinal. You can, typical name name, chemical name is ocresol, methylphenol. So some people would describe it like Band-Aid, hospital-like, clinic, dentist, mouthwash. But again, going back to standardize a training tool rather than just using vocabularies when you do your training. More way to talk about medicinal. When you do sample testing, either it's in-process product or final finished brew, every little defect, it's a broad term in terms of defects, and off notes and aromas or off tastes or color, every little flaw tells you a little story about your product. Whether the beans were wrong, the soil was wrong, or the water was not 100% like the one that you had before. So taste, off notes and off taste of flavors tells a lot of stories about that cup of coffee you want to serve to your consumer. More icons. This one is called acetaldehyde, and it typically has a flavor of a very green apple, but some people will actually describe it as emotion paint. So it's got a little bit alcohol in it. So again, using vocabularies to describe the same off note is quite challenging sometimes. We all have different understanding. So the best way is to use an actual tool when you do tasting and training. Here is the telltale sign, the origin. When you're picking up acetaldehyde in your coffee, what does that say? Okay, I'm going to go quite quick, because these are pretty much just different icons that show the same principles of using icon to tell you the off notes rather than using vocabulary. And every off note, off taste, off aroma tells you a little story about why it's not 100% in your coffee. Okay, so here's the bit that I do all the time. 5 steps to managing the sensory panel. I do this a lot with the global beverage companies and including coffee company as well. But this may be quite new to you for some of the coffee shops owners or roasters. Whether you're a big shop, a big global coffee brand owner or a small coffee shop chain owner, the 5 steps to managing the sensory panel is the same, big or small. You always start with selection. Not everyone is suitable to be a quality control taste panelist. Let's face it. You can be trained to be a good taster, but a lot of the talent is actually born. It's not unusual that we are anosmic, which means we are blind to certain off flavors of taste. That's why the quality control should never be done by just one person. It's a massive responsibility just to put that person to be solely responsible for the quality control of the release of your products. We work in a panel, we work in a group. So selection is important. So you want to rule out who is absolutely not suitable as a taster. So you move on to screening, and then you train. After someone's been trained, you want to maintain their trained skills. Training is a big investment. It doesn't happen just in 1 hour, 30-minute session. It's a process. It's a small investment from any small or big organization. So after the training skills be created, you want to monitor and maintain your trained panel. And after that, you want to find a tool to validate everyone that has been trained and maintained. Perhaps on an annual basis, I think you already do some of this already. All the baristas get together, they go through a certification program for tasters, and we do the same as well. But just another graph to show you the differences for someone who has been professionally trained to do quality control versus someone who has been professionally trained, but also regularly validated and maintained, perhaps through a certification, a global certification program perhaps. So again, just like training, you want to standardize your training process, training protocols. The easiest way to standardize a panelist calibration program for validation is having a very easy to use tool. So these are the off-notes and defects recognition. Just an example, it's not real data actually. I have here 3 tasters. They have all gone through the same training process. Now they're being maintained and validated, and you can see the strengths in different tasters, different panelists. Just another example of what it could look like for someone. This is a snapshot of an exercise we'll be doing in the workshop this afternoon. I won't give away too much detail because that's spoiled the fun really. So here's my last slide before we move on to Q&A. So typically, to the left is what your coffee roaster house, coffee shop. That let's say you have 3 to 5 people working at your organization. So that's what you will be doing when you do the panelist training and then validation, maintaining. But if you're a global brand owner, and that is what it will look like, you have a much bigger global operation, but each of them is actually made up of smaller or regional panels. So the global, for example, Dahlia Ebbers, JDE, they might have a global view looking like that. But there, breaking down from the global view, you will actually get a regional view. So it just goes back to my earliest comment on no one person should be given the sole responsibility to do quality control and product release. It's a massive responsibility. Work in a group, then you have a more objective view. Whether you're a global brand owner, you're looking at 20 regional panels results, or you're a single shop owner, you only look at your own result. But what we're trying to achieve in terms of final product quality control is always the same. That's it for me.
So thank you very much for that, Marie. Before we ask the audience a few questions, I thought I could start. So one thing that springs to mind is, obviously you alluded to this, the specialty coffee industry, the sector is quite different from, say, commercial large-scale companies. And for instance, I guess my question is, what do you think is the smallest acceptable sensory panel, like in terms of numbers of people? My thinking is basically there will be some businesses, some roasters, for instance, who might be 1 or 2 people operations. And in the past, I've experienced some people inviting other industry professionals or potentially their own customers to be part of their sensory panel. And if you think that's a good idea, or you think it might be negative in some way?
That's a very good question. I get asked that a lot, actually. Not just coffee shops or small roasters, even other beverage companies, their juice bar. They will say, there's only 3 of us working here. We cannot possibly make that work. Yes, it can, actually. The sensory, actually, itself is just a science. And the science itself doesn't discriminate. Whether you're 80 years old, you're 5, or it doesn't matter what your job background is. It does not discriminate. Either you've got it or you haven't. If you have got it, then you're incredibly fortunate, and you should be trained to make sure that your skills stay consistent. 3 is the bare minimum, I will say, because it actually gives you a product control protocol where you two out of 3 say yes to release a product, then you got a protocol going. 2 is simply is enough. It's one say yes, the other one say no, and typically in an environment like that, the one say yes probably want to influence the one that say no. So 3 is the minimum, actually.
Another thing that springs to mind, I guess, is you know, you've suggested that obviously people can be trained, but they will have some natural ability. In your experience, when you're looking for people to be part of these panels, maybe new people, what untrained people, what are the things that suggest they'll be a good panelist? Are there taste tests you do, or it's something else?
Yes, screening is incredibly key. Typically, we will start with 4 basic tastes, which is salty, sweet, sour, and bitter. So if someone who cannot differentiate any of the 4, then that is a little red flag to you, actually. 4 basic tastes means taste. None of these actually have aroma indicators, so you cannot smell sweet, sour, bitter. Some people typically will describe this product smells sweet. You cannot smell sweet. You smell something that reminds you of something that is sweet, but you don't smell sweet at all. You could smell vanilla or honey, but people don't typically understand the differences.
And do you find a lot of people fail those tests, or it's?
No, the percentages are no. It's usually, I would say 95% of the people would actually pass the test.
Okay, that gives everyone some hope, I think. So if there's any audience questions, I think Hannah has a microphone that she can run around. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask Marie?
See anything. What kind of?
God, there's got to be at least one in there. There we go.
Hi. What's other tests that can, so after you've done the 4 tastes, basic tastes, what's another test that you do for screening?
Oh, there are quite a few tests, actually. It's more, we can do flavor recognition. For example, you have a core product within your brand, your operation, and because it's core, you want all your trained panelists to be able to recognize some of the very basic positive flavors or negative flavors at the same time. So it's what we call flavor recognition. So you can typically train on those maybe 4 or 5 core flavors, whether they are bad or good flavors, it doesn't matter. You can, some of the typical coffee beans would have a vanilla note, and if that is a desirable note in your brand, then that is the one that you definitely want your panelists to be able to pick up. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, down here at the front. Jessie, Mike.
There's a lot of walking up and down.
Mary, thank you very much for joining us today. I was just curious if you could give us a little bit of a background on how you got into this field yourself.
I didn't have a sensory background, actually. Most of us don't have, it's very rare to have scientists that actually have a strong sensory background. I had a double degree in psychology, well, that's marginally related to sense panel management and economics. So I had 7 years working on a commercial banker in City of London, actually. And then before that, I worked at CNN Hong Kong for Asia Desk on financial news. so nothing to do with sensory. But I've always liked to experiment tastes, flavors, and I've always thought I have a very keen nose and taste. Love foods and matching foods with drinks, and that's how it got me started with a company, with Flavor Active. I actually started off working at Flavor Active to do their business analyst, but 6 months later they wanted me to become more and more involved. I went into a training program and got myself certified as a sensory trainer. So that's it. That's about 9 years ago.
We can get another quick round of applause from Marie.